Hello Year 6, welcome to Tuesday's English. So, simple starter to be getting going with. All I'd like you to do is I'd like you to complete the table, ticking once in each row to show what type of adverb the adverb is. Is it an adverb of manner, an adverb of time, or an adverb of place? We've already spoke before about those being the three main types of adverb. So you just need to read down, think about whether it is telling you how something is being done, when something is being done, or where something is being done. When you've done that, write it in your book and then send it in to me with the rest of your work. Start the video up again when you've done it and I'll show you what the correct answers should have been. Speak to you in a second. Okay, so wearily, that tells you how somebody does something. There tells you where something is being done, and later tells you when something is being done. Fast tells you how, yesterday tells you when, and everywhere tells you where. Simple as that, really. No tricks to it. It is as easy as it looks. So, yesterday. Yesterday we were looking at the way that we can extend sentences and extend detail by adding more clauses. And we looked at various different ones. We looked at adding contractions and conjunctions. I always muddle those two. Adding conjunctions to then add more detail. We looked at adding subordination and having subordinate clauses. And we also looked at adding relative pronouns and relative clauses. This was an example of a relative clause. The sun, which had been out since first thing this morning, was shining. And we talked about the fact that there are 5 main relative pronouns: who, whom, which, whilst, and that. There's also whose and a few others as well. We also then looked at the subordinate clauses. The sun was shining, despite the fact that it was the middle of December. And we talked about the way they could be identified is by the fact you can move the main clause and the subordinate clause both ways round, and the sentence still makes sense. So we could easily have said, despite the fact this was the middle of December, the sun was shining. Today, we're going to be looking at how we can adapt our vocabulary to better persuade a reader, an important skill when writing persuasive letters. What I'll be looking for is you having a go at identifying which words need adapting, using your knowledge of synonyms to be able to adapt, and then understanding how language can change the formality of a piece of writing. So, I've got an example here of an opening paragraph. You've already had a waggle of an opening paragraph of a persuasive letter. This is a bad example, so I suppose you could call this a baggle instead of a waggle. Oh, that wouldn't work, would it? Be what a bad one looks like. So it'd be a wabble. It's an unusual word. So what I'd like you to do is I'd firstly like you to have a read over it. So pause the screen and have a read over it and see if you can think, before we look at anything in any detail, can you think why this is a bad example? What makes it not a good opening paragraph to a persuasive letter? There are several things. So have a think and see if you can spot any of them. When you've done that, start the video up again, because we're then going to go through it in a little more detail. So I'll speak to you in a second. Okay. One thing this is bad at is it's too aggressive. It's too forceful and combative and in your face and very much you're wrong, I'm right, and that's not persuasive. Some examples of where it is being too aggressive are things like when it says to insist that you don't take my consolation powers. Well, you're not in a position to insist. You can't be insisting. If you could just insist and have it done exactly as you wanted, you wouldn't need to write a letter. So that is too aggressive, too forceful. That's not going to work. That's not going to persuade. All that's going to do is make them angry, the person that you're writing to, make them feel offended and defensive. Another example is where it says, it would be crazy to blame me. It would be crazy. You're crazy. If you think you can do that, you're crazy. It's sort of insulting, isn't it? You don't want to be doing that. You want to be flattering them, if anything. You want to be being nice to try and get them onto your side. You are all to blame, trying to flip it so that you're saying that they're the ones in the wrong. Again, you're going to be getting them against you, not on your side. You're not persuading them. You're pushing them away. And that's the opposite of what you're trying to do with this piece of writing. I'd have known more about the whole prisoner 42 thing, wouldn't I? That sort of sarcastic, chatty, chat back kind of response. Again, it's too forceful, too aggressive. It's not persuasive in any way. Another thing that it doesn't do very well is it doesn't maintain a formal tone. Now, we've done some work on formal tone, so I am going to highlight where it's not formal, but before I show you where it's highlighted, I'd like you to pause the screen and see if you can identify all the places where this letter is not formal. It should be, it isn't. So can you spot all the places where this letter doesn't maintain a formal tone? Pause the video, have a go at trying to find them. When you've done that, start the video up again and I'll show you where they are. I'll speak to you in a second. Okay, so there are lots of areas where this letter is not very formal at all. Contractions, straight away, first sentence. Don't, should be do not. Crazy, we don't use words like that. We'll look at how we can edit this in a minute. Madness, so the vocabulary, the language that kicked off. Again, that's not formal. You need to think about what language we use. It's not just about contractions and punctuation. It's about the actual word choices we make, the language choices we go for. Exclamation marks. Contractions again, contractions, contractions, contractions. They're all over the place. So it's immediately apparent that this is not a formal piece of writing. And that's not going to help you being persuasive, because part of being persuasive in a letter is being respectful, and you show respect through your language choices. You show respect through your formality. Hopefully you spotted all of those. You, I would imagine, all spotted the punctuation and the contractions. It'd be interesting to see if any of you spotted some of the language as examples of where it's not being very formal. Also, what this letter doesn't do, but that you should be doing, is you're meant to be trying to appeal to the person that you're writing to. You're trying to get them on your side, so you want to be flattering them. You want to be complimenting them. You want to be talking about how sort of wonderful they are almost, without being over the top. There's a word called sycophantic. You don't want to be that. That's where you're just being too obsessed with how brilliant somebody is and it ends up just sounding awful and sarcastic and fake. You don't do that. But you do want to be appealing to them. You want to be being polite, respectful, maybe flattering them a little bit, maybe complimenting them a little bit. This letter doesn't do any of that. In fact, sometimes it does the complete opposite. You are all to blame. Sorry that it happened, but not saying sorry. Oh, I'm sorry it happened. Not I'm sorry. Sorry it happened. It's called a caveated apology, that, where it's not really an apology. You're just saying, oh, it's like saying, oh, I'm sorry I was caught. Not sorry I did it, but I'm sorry I was caught. I will try to make it better if I can. Again, it's not filling the person you're writing to with much confidence. You're sort of saying, oh, well, I'll give it a go. Maybe. if I can. So there's lots of things there that suggest they're not really that bothered. So we talked about the fact that language itself was sometimes at fault and to blame for this not being very formal. That's very, very much true in this letter. And you need to identify that and you need to change it. To make something good, we make mistakes and then we edit it. That's part of it. You get stuff down on paper, it's not perfect straight away, it never will be, then we edit it. So let's look at some of the areas that we need to improve. So, dear Zodiac Council, that's fine, got the comma in the right place. I'm writing to you today to insist, I don't like insist. It's too aggressive. It's not what we're meant to be doing. It's not persuasive, it's angry. So instead of insist, I am writing to you today to request. Requesting is fine. That's very sort of formal. It's also just polite. It's respectful. It's saying, you're in charge. I'm just making this request. Not insisting. It's very different. I'm writing to you today to request that you don't, well, we can't have don't, so that needs to be do not, but we'll do that separately. We're focusing on vocabulary at the minute, not formality. That you don't take my constellation powers from me. It would be crazy. Well, we've already talked about we don't like crazy. So it would be unjust, much more formal, much more persuasive. It would be unjust to blame me for the madness. Don't like madness. Oh, I don't like blame me, actually, for that matter. To blame me. It just sounds a bit childish. To hold me accountable. That sounds more mature, more professional, more formal. And I don't like the madness. For the unfortunate event that we can't have kicked off, that occurred down on Earth, especially as it was really all that mortal boy's fault. I don't like that bit either. We could change that bit too. I'm not going through the whole thing though. This was just to give you an idea of what your editing should look like. Because that's what I'd like you to do today. I'd like you to think about all those different things that we've edited from the first paragraph. We looked at formality. We looked at not being too aggressive. We looked at vocabulary to help us seem more formal and also help us be more persuasive. We looked at making sure that we are appealing to the person we're writing to. And that is really important. So thinking about all those things, I'd like you to have a go at editing this next to, well, the full next paragraph and the start of the third paragraph of this persuasive letter. That way, you should start being able to think about the language that you're using, as well as the punctuation that we're using, and how we make the tone of this persuasive letter really work at being persuasive and winning round the person we're writing to. When you've done that, as ever, take a photo, send it in to me, and I'll feed back to you with anything that you need to sort of know, anything you need to tweak, anything you need to change. I'll speak to you in your feedback this afternoon, and I'll speak to you with your next lessons tomorrow. For now, though, goodbye.